Good morning. My name is Marilyn Pratt. I'm community advocate for the SAP Community Network, and you're not. Well, I'm here this morning with Hester Hilbrick from the Developer Experience, with Sinchan, who is the Realizing Empathy director, and with Paul Tomlinson from Capgemini, who was a participant in last night's event called The Role of Empathy in Design Thinking. So, an event about empathy in Las Vegas and TechEd?
Well, I mean, it's interesting to talk about empathy in Las Vegas, especially because often people think empathy is devoid or non-existent in a particular place or a particular person. But it's something I believe that it can be nurtured if you practice it, if you become aware of it. So I think it's actually very good that we're actually in Las Vegas talking about empathy, just so you would have that contrast and realization that if you have the mindset and the attitude, you can have empathy any place and in any context.
But what is this context? I mean, we said the role of empathy in design thinking. Some of the expectations of the participants were to have a design thinking workshop. Can you teach design thinking in a workshop that's 3 hours long and that also has an introduction about the role of empathy in design thinking, Hester?
So when somebody asks me, Hester, can you give me a crash course or can you teach me design thinking, I always say, well, for me it's a mindset. It's something that has to evolve. It's something you can practice definitely, but not by attending a 3-hour session.
Mm-hmm.
So I mostly call them awareness sessions rather than trainings or coachings.
And for those who don't know really what design thinking is, can you give us a really brief summary of some of the methodology?
And a crash course.
And a crash course within 30 seconds. So basically, design thinking is a process which has 6 steps, and it helps you to create products that are fulfilling users' needs. So a very important part of design thinking is actually going out there, talking to the people you're designing for, developing empathy for the people you talk to, and find those needs and building a product based on that need.
And so, from my understanding, the event, the evening, is driven by a need of SAP to do what in terms of user experience and...
I was thinking about this morning in preparing for this morning, and
and we should note that, Hester, you were a facilitator of design thinking. Your perspective is one of a participant in the event.
Yeah, absolutely, and previously in InnerJam at the beginning of the week, obviously we did some of this as well. But you and I obviously have been doing SAP for many years, and in the old days we as developers just used to design the screens ourselves and not worry too much about about the end users. But obviously these days people's expectations have completely changed, with everybody having their own computers and tablets and using Amazon and other things like that. So now they expect their business systems to work the same. And as developers, we can't do that without thinking about the users and having empathy and having design.
Yeah, I heard once the expression that we usually think and do. In the best case scenario, we think and do, and sometimes we just do. But the idea of empathy and design thinking is a kind of connect, think, do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, a lot of times when people say empathy, they often think it starts with the other, as in you have to sort of get out of yourself and kind of adopt a new perspective. And that's true. But in order to do that, it really has to start with a self. Because we have biases, prejudices, and narrow-mindedness, just to be candid, that will prevent us from getting to that person, to connecting with that person, even before we engage in any kind of conversation. And this is not just the other, but also yourself. Because the idea of self is kind of an elusive thing. What does that even mean, yourself? And in order to sort of get to the heart of that, you really need to practice what's called self-empathy, where you're trying to understand, why do I think the way I do? Why do I judge people the way I'm judging them? These things are completely automatic and reactive. And until you practice self-empathy, it's very difficult to even come to the idea that you have any kind of biases or prejudices. So it's only once you have done that that you are somewhat ready to engage with the other in order to practice empathy with the other.
And the event itself was sponsored, if you will, by your group, which is Developer Experience, and an additional new group that's formed in SAP called Design and User Experience. And so experience is that common denominator. Last night was an experiential night. I mean, people might have come in with the thought that they were going to get all of these methodologies around design thinking, but it really was a kind of experience. I'd like to do something that is a design thinking thing, and I'd like to know from each of you what I wish and I like and a how-to about your experience of the evening, and I'll start with a participant.
Okay, so what I wish or wished was that actually it was a longer session, so I really enjoyed it. What I really liked, particularly with Slim's talk and the talk about empathy starts with yourself, because it's not something I don't think people really think of. They quite often think about what others may want, particularly when it comes to design, but they don't really start and take out the prejudices and things like that. Apologies. So I think I want. I wish, I like.
And how to.
And how to. So yes, my how-to last night was, I thought one of the big things last night when people were standing up about, when they talked about experiences they'd had and things like that, my thoughts for hopefully a session will happen again in Madrid around this, and then next year back in Las Vegas, was it really got people talking to each other when they were talking about their experiences, and assuming that the session would be longer, is that something that could be done over a bit of food and a glass of wine and things like that to help people relax as they do, reveal quite personal details when they're looking at themselves from an empathy point of view.
Well, leave the audience wanting more is a
Absolutely. Well, I like the fact that we're talking about empathy at a technology conference. This was an eye-opener for me, because I don't think I really quite understood the context in which I'm talking about this until the InnoJam. And I was trained as a computer scientist, and I've programmed for over a decade. I know what it's like to be a developer, but I haven't done that for the past 4 years, and I kind of forgotten about it. And I was talking to the people in the table, and I was just completely thrown back to what it was like to program and the kind of complaints that we have about development environments, and it just brought me back to this place. Yet I just realized, wow, but we're talking about empathy, and this is, to me, very unique in the sense that it's usually a technology-driven world, especially companies like that are making software. But now we're bringing in something that's like a hint of humanity into technology, which is extremely needed. And somebody like you are sort of advocating it and pioneering in this area is, I think, truly inspiring. That's what I like. What I wish is that I wish I could have met every single person in the audience yesterday, because I was sort of in my speaking mode, and I just sort of, kind of zoned into that, and I was almost kind of in a flow, I guess, so to speak, and it wasn't clear how it influenced people until it was all said and done. Not even after my talk, because people had things to do, but at the end of the night, when people started coming up to me and talking about how it affected them. And it was really inspiring, because these were people who had just met, like strangers, and they were having this conversation. These two people came up to me, and I thought they had this sort of interaction vibe of being like a husband and wife or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, just talking about how the talk was. And then I said, oh, so you guys are husband and wife? They're like, no. I'm like, oh, so you guys are colleagues? No. What do you mean? Like, we just met. I'm like, wow. And you're having this amazing, very candid discussion about these personal things. And I don't think I've ever seen that in a technology conference, to be quite frank. That's sort of my I wish, and my how-to is, how do we continue to model empathy? That's a big thing of mine. I don't think we should talk about empathy. I don't think we should read about empathy. I think we should model empathy, because I think we all learn from observing other people do something, and we go, oh, I really like that. how can I do that myself? And doing by example and learning by example, I think is the fastest way we can promote and spread humanity into technology.
And I wish we had more time. I think we're going to have to curtail the employee perspectives on I Like, I Wish, and thank my guests. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very
both
much.
for your leadership, your driving an incredible evening, and your participation, especially as audience.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, thanks. Yeah.